It's time for SC250 Tuesday, bringing you information about Chesterfield County, the PD region, and South Carolina's role in the American Revolution. Our very special guest today is local historian Mrs. Sarah Spruill, the person who probably knows more about the history of Cheraw and the history of Old St. David's than anyone. Welcome, Ms. Spruill.
Thank you.
Tell us about Cheraw's part that they played in the American Revolution. Now, Cheraw was established around 1740-ish.
Yes, a little bit earlier maybe. There were settlers closer to Society Hill, but when the Welch were given the Welch tract, they came into the area, which kind of forced people who weren't Baptist up further along the Great PD. So Cheraw was the head of navigation for the Great PD, so that was a great place for them to start. And they have ancestors, those same people have ancestors still in our area. The Ellabys were amongst those, the Poes, the Gillespies, the Thompsons, and it was a great place to settle. So that's really how Cheraw became a small place, but a place of prominence in the Revolutionary era. The church, Old St. David's, was established in 1768, and it was important that they have a parish established here because that also gave them, the vestry was more or less a government body as well as a religious one, and that gave them the right to have court up here eventually, to take care of the poor in the parish. They actually could tax people to help do that, and things like the roads. So it was really important to have the parish, which was all of now Chesterfield County, Marlborough County, Darlington County, part of Florence County, and part of Marion County. So it was a wide area.
And it was so important because we had the business area here also, or as much business as you could have back in the 1700s. But Cheraw was one of the larger districts in the entire state at that point.
That's right. And you're right. It was somewhat a commercial area. So in the decade before the Revolution, another important point was that there was a ferry here, and it was one of the very few ferries across the whole PD. People don't quite realize sometimes how much difference topography makes. To have a ferry, you really needed to have a high bank on both sides so that you weren't, if you had a high bank just on one side, you would end up in the swamp on the other side. So it was important. If you go down to Riverside Park now, you can actually see that, and that you can see from there a little distance down where one side is high and one side is low. So that was important too. So the Kershaws came here in the 1760s and established a ferry. They also gave the land that Old St. David's is located on and laid out the present town of Cheraw. And both the Kershaws were important in the Revolution. Ely Kershaw was the one who had a store here in Cheraw, and his brother Joseph Kershaw was a prominent merchant in Camden, and they had a business together here. And of course, Kershaw County is named for Joseph Kershaw. And they were taken at the fall of Charleston. They were captured, both Ely and Joseph Kershaw. And Ely Kershaw actually died in captivity on his way to Florida. So that, I think, is one reason that Cheraw eventually, though it was a true civil war, the American Revolution here, but Cheraw had a number of men who were partisans who fought with Francis Marion. The Ellerbys, for example, but I have wondered recently, Christopher Gadsden, who was the firebrand of the Revolution from Charleston, and it was his flag that was the "Don't Tread on Me" flag that you see so often. But he had a trading post here in Spruill about where the Spruill Country Club is now. So he was in business with people here, and the Ellebys, of course, their original properties were down in that area. And so, I can't help but think that people in our area were influenced both by Gadsden and by Kershaw. And, of course, they had been regulators before the Revolution started, which were groups where, because we did not have courts in the back country, there were sort of vigilante groups, but good vigilante groups. And we were being, the area was subject to being raids from people up in North Carolina because, and I've never understood this, Jane, why the Scots were around Laurinburg and so forth, why they were almost to a man British sympathizers, because, of course, they'd left Scotland because of the British, but they were, and they would raid down here and take cattle and whatever. And so they were used to being opposed to the powers of the British powers at that point. So shortly after St. David's was established, they set up, by the Court Acts, the Charles Judicial District, which were the same limits as St. David's Parish, and that was located in Society Hill. But because the parish was already established up here, people from Society Hill had to come up here to pledge allegiance to the British because Spruill was part of a outer line of defense that went from here all the way to 96 into Augusta. We were kind of the jumping off point in that period. And so after the fall of Charleston in May of 1780, by June, they were already up here. And as you can imagine, it was just as hot then as it is right now today. And they, of course, went in their woolen uniforms and did not know as much about staying away from the river in the summertime as the locals would have. And the one local actually warned them that staying down by the river was dangerous for health reasons, and they thought it was maybe a miasma. And of course, we know it's the mosquitoes.
Yes, oh yes,
that were down there. So a number of them became sick with malaria. It might have been smallpox, but I'm guessing it was malaria more from the description, because people knew what smallpox looked like. Those of us who are as old as me, we all got smallpox vaccinations, and they are pox. I mean, make a quite visible scab. And so if it had been smallpox, I think they would have said smallpox, though that did sweep the state that year. So a number of them became ill, and 2 of the officers and an unknown number of soldiers are buried at Old St. David's Church. And you can see those with a brick cairn over them, which is a Scottish burial practice. I have seen a picture from a painting, a watercolor from the 1830s that shows those cairns being much larger than what you see today. But I'm guessing people walked off with the brick, but they are still there. And they were here all that summer. They left here to go to the Battle of Camden, and so they play a role in that battle, and you can read about that in Camden. A couple of the people that I don't think people associate as much with Spruill and the Revolution actually had just moved into North Carolina just before 1776, and that among those is Thomas Wade, for whom the Wadesboro is named, he had been here and actually on the vestry at St. David's. And General William Harrington, who's quite famous in North Carolina Revolutionary War history, and he had moved just over the line into North Carolina. So General Harrington's forces came back into Cheraw in the fall of 1780, and they were then in and out after that. So St. David's really played a real role in the war, but people don't hear about it as much because there was never a real battle here. British prisoners got on the river. They weren't British prisoners, I'm sorry. Prisoners that the British had taken in our area. Cheraw had the jail, too. And so British prisoners that they had taken in our area were put on the Great PD right here at Cheraw and sent down the river to Georgetown. But the Patriots knew that, and they attacked the British in Marlborough County at Hunts Bluff, which is a really fun story how they did that. And they got prisoners back. So there's so many things that touched on Cheraw, and particularly St. David's Church, but people don't know the role Cheraw played.
And now you can walk around the grounds of Old St. David's. You can go in Old St. David's, no admission fee.
Right. You can do, there's several things there. A British couple here in Cheraw actually has put up, not a monument, but a plaque to telling about the 71st Highlanders and what happened to them afterwards. And, of course, some of the people who fought in the war are also buried there. Though most of the time, people were buried on their plantations at that time period. But you can really get a feel for what the times were like when you go down to Old St. David's and go down to the river and imagine a ferry there and imagine being able to go from Cheraw to Georgetown by water. This time of year, if you look back up the river, when you're crossing the bridge where it is now, you can definitely see where the fish weirs were and where what they call the Cheraw Rapids are. So it's very obvious, though it's hard to see. Don't try to look if you're driving the car. But if you're a passenger and you look over the bridge, you can see the Cheraw Rapids or the Cheraw Falls that made such a difference at that time period.
And Laney Landing is such a beautiful place down on the river. Numerous people have been married there and family picnics there, and of course the boat landing to launch your boats there. And the river has just played such a valuable role in the state of South Carolina. I understand there is a vessel that our local attorney and historian himself, Miller Ingram, discovered years ago, and it is named the Miller Vessel because it is located in the river. It's still in the river, but it's been documented in the state archives.
Yes, that's right. And during office hours, Miller has a little display in his office where you have a few items in there that were found in that area. Boats like that, for the most part, if you bring them out of the water, they dry out instantly and will just disintegrate, more or less. But also Calvin Craft, who grew up here in Cheraw, when he was a little boy, he found a button at Riverside Park that is from the 71st Highlanders, and it's at the little Lyceum Museum. And right now we've got a display at the Cheraw Arts Commission about the 250th anniversary and about the Revolutionary War. So they're all kind of little fun things that you can explore if you know where to look.
And Cheraw has so much history, and we hope that during this time of focus on SC250, that everyone will come out and learn just a little bit more about Cheraw and the PD's history. I know I certainly have. You've been listening to SC250 Tuesday, bringing you information about Chesterfield County, the PD region, and South Carolina's role in the American Revolution, and brought to you by the SC250 Commission. Our guest today has been local historian Mrs. Sarah Spruill.